Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. And for our fourth segment of the day, we are moving on to the 6-3 matchup. A lot of people calling this perhaps the most uneven matchup out of all these matchups here in the quarterfinals, but still a very exciting proposition here to talk about between Penn State and Boise State. Two starkly similar teams when we look at them from how they're structurally built, but ultimately one with a little bit more of an advantage. But looking at this game, looking at the large spread here, one in which Penn State could be the highest ever favorite, according to Vegas, ever in the bowl era. I do think that you can't necessarily count out Boise State, though. And there are reasons as to why this game could be a lot closer than I think, even if it's just to cover up the spread for Boise State here. So without further ado, let us break it down from the betting perspective and as to how both of these teams can pull out the victories. Let's start off with shocking 6th seed here, Penn State. Penn State are a football team that seem like they have a very uncertain identity. They can't necessarily decide what they want to be at any given time, but they've strung together wins in such an impressive manner that they have sneakily become a true dark horse contender here to win this entire thing. When I look at them, when I think balance, it is weird to think, but it's not necessarily cliche, because I love what they do on offense. I love the bringing in an addition of Andy Kotelnicki at the offensive coordinator position, and I love that Drew Aller has become a little bit more reliant on himself as a passer, and that has really transformed what this offense can ultimately be able and be capable of doing. Because if it were like last year, and Penn State got into the field then with that same 11-2 record, I would not have thought highly of them. Drew Aller wasn't there yet. This run game, yes, was as spectacular as it was this season, but certainly not enough to really compensate for anything Penn State could have done defensively, even though their defense was pretty impressive last year. But now I see ultimate transformation, an ultimate shift in mindset and narrative here for Penn State, where they believe in this offense, Drew Aller believes in himself, and ultimately we're reaping the benefits. But if there is any one caveat, it's that Drew Aller is too over-reliant on a certain target here. And not that Tyler Warren can't carry this team to the promised land. This man can do anything. And he literally has done everything for this Penn State offense this season. But I do think the best we've seen of Penn State is this reliance on keeping Drew Aller in rhythm and ultimately finishing people off with this balanced running attack between Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. That's where we've seen the best of this Penn State offense in rhythm. Because when you know Drew Aller looks competent, when he looks capable, when he looks comfortable, most importantly, that is when Penn State can really annihilate a football team. That's when Penn State can really key in on what makes them special. And that's when this confidence that people now have in this team can be realized. Because if Drew Aller hits a roadblock along the way, that's when I start to panic, because it certainly doesn't necessarily fall on his shoulders entirely, this offense, should you know they fall out of step, fall out of rhythm, but it comes down to Drew Aller keeping up this confidence in himself and the confidence the team has in reciprocity for him. Because I think that if this remains the formula for Penn State, a lot of people will find a hard time beating it. So that's why Penn State are now a hefty 11-point favorite in this game, even though, Boise State is a very weird 3 seed. But let's talk about them a little bit, because we can't necessarily disrespect them at this juncture, because this Boise State team has been one of the best teams in the nation. Maybe not the third best team in the nation as their seed says they are, but certainly a team certainly competent enough to really make this a challenge for Penn State. Like I said, they could cover the spread here. I think this is a little of a lofty spread for a team in Boise State that really can keep on schedule here. And so when I look at both sides of the football for Boise State, yes, it's going to have to come down to the offensive play. It's going to have to come down to Ashton Jeanty here. And Ashton Jeanty, I feel like, is completely capable of running this Penn State defense and wearing it down, and ultimately relieving the pressure certainly placed on Maddox Madsen's shoulders at the QB position. But I can't necessarily shake the fact that Maddox Madsen is going to have to have a spectacular game. It's going to be a similar sentiment in our last segment when we talk about Arizona State as well. When we look at these two teams and where they fit in terms of the playoff landscape. They're both led, and I don't necessarily want to foreshadow my ASU portion of this next segment, but Boise State is led by an everyman running back. He really is what this offense is all about, and Maddox Madsen ultimately relies on him almost a little bit too much to carry them to the promised land. But I do think that Maddox Madsen is going to have to step up in certain moments, and it's going to be very difficult against a Penn State defensive front and secondary that's rounding into form after having 2 pick sixes against SMU quarterback Kevin Jennings, who was having a very impressive season up to that point in this situation. And so, looking at the ways in which Boise State can win, look for Maddox Madsen to get the ball out very quickly. When I look at what Maddox Madsen can do, he's certainly a confident passer. He has accuracy in his game. He can get into a rhythm. It's not just about relying on Ashton Jeanty to pound the football 30-odd times. Maddox Madsen, if you can believe it, averages nearly 29 pass attempts per game. That's a pretty hefty number for a quarterback who is as over-reliant on his running back as Maddox Madsen is. But when I think about what this Penn State defensive front can do to him, with the pressures they can design, and what this Penn State secondary in the back end is capable of doing, when you look at a quarterback the magnitude of Maddox Madsen and compare him to what Penn State might have done against Curtis Rourke, or Kevin Jennings in the last game, he's going to definitely have a tough time. So look for this game to ultimately come down to the rhythm that Boise State can develop with a guy in Maddox Madsen who is going to have to be trusted a lot more often than not. And then the game plan for Penn State's defense is very much like it was against SMU, even though Maddox Madsen isn't as mobile as Kevin Jennings. Make him strictly a pocket passer. Force Maddox Madsen to throw the football to win. Because if Maddox Madsen throws the football a lot more often than normal, then Boise State's in trouble. Boise State's playing catch-up in that moment, and PSU certainly can cover this threat. Cover the spread. But I think that Penn State defensively isn't necessarily down to, just this defensive front. It's down to the secondary as well, because the secondary not only has the skill and the raw talent there to make this a blowout, but ultimately I do think that Ashton Jeanty can kind of neutralize that Penn State defensive front a little bit and potentially force this Penn State secondary to be hyper alert and hyper focused on slowing down the pass game from Maddox Madsen. That could lean into a Boise State advantage here, should Ashton Jeanty start to wear down this front and thus allow Maddox Madsen to potentially get into rhythm where the secondary was too hyper focused on stopping Jeanty in the first place. So that could play into Boise State's strengths, but ultimately Penn State had very few weaknesses on the defensive side of the football. So everything is going to have to be very perfect for Boise State's offense in this one if they have a chance. And for Penn State, offensively, I just think that all the things I talked about are what define this football team here. All the things about Drew Aller, all the things about this running game between Singleton and Allen, all the things about everyman Tyler Ward, all the things about what the addition of OC Andy Kotelnicki means for the squad has to translate to the football field. Because if it doesn't, and they come out a little bit slowly, then all the worry that this Penn State fan base had last year seeps back in. Because a lot of people after last season were not necessarily comfortable saying that Drew Aller was the guy moving forward. This season, he's kind of dispelled those rumors a little bit. But this is the quarterfinals of the College Football Playoff. And you're in a very favorable matchup here against a team that's definitely going to be up against it on the offensive side of the football. But Boise State's defense can't be underestimated. Hassanin, Virgin Morgan, excellent pass rushers. And yes, it's going to be a difficult setting for them in this environment, but they can get home and pressure Drew Aller. And we haven't necessarily seen Drew Aller really face that much pressure in football games this season. And so, once he comes under that pressure, he's going to have to really live up to this reputation as a 5-star athlete and really live up to his reputation as a Penn State starting quarterback, because ultimately, he's going to have to keep this offense in rhythm here. It can't just all be on Singleton, Allen, and Warren in this one. It's going to have to come down to the play of Drew Aller and what he and offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki can cook up for this offensive game plan. But going into the prediction, looking at this hefty spread here, all in favor of Penn State, and looking at this over-under of 52.5, moneyline PSU minus 500, Boise plus 360, I have to go with Penn State here. And I certainly said that Boise State, or implied that Boise State could cover the spread, and they almost certainly can. But ultimately, I can't look past the fact that Penn State just has a lot more ways to win this football game. They're a bigger, stronger, faster team. And ultimately, Drew Aller may not even have to be the guy for Penn State in this one. He may have to make a couple of big plays, but ultimately, they have the offense and the defense to help compensate for any mistakes made by Drew Aller. They have contingency plans going for them in this one. So that's what is the difference for me here in this matchup. And even like I said, if Maddox Madison plays perfectly, if Ashton Jeanty wears down this Penn State defensive front, it's still going to be a mountain to climb trying to stop this Penn State offense for Boise State. So I have to pick Penn State here, even though it is a lofty spread, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable saying that. So I am going to take the risk here and take Penn State all in. But coming up to finish today's show is the 5-4 matchup, perhaps the most bizarre matchup out of all of them in the quarterfinals. Texas-Arizona State to finish today's show and finish the CFP quarterfinal preview right after this short break.